Hello, everybody, and welcome back. If you watched my last video, I've gotten a little bit better webcam and an actual microphone. Still a pretty humble production, and it's kind of meant to be that way. I don't really want to spend a lot of time on bells and whistles, but I do want to spend time tonight discussing the nation of Israel, and I don't want to discuss it necessarily from a geopolitical standpoint. However, it's hard today to discuss it at all without getting into geopolitics to some sense. But I want to look at Israel more as a third way for modern American Christians, at least, and a way of looking at the conflict and the situation and the nation and the people through a Genesis 6 lens and with some Catholic theology sprinkled in for good mix. As I said in my last video, this is not an attempt to make anybody Catholic. This is not an effort to shove Catholicism down anybody's throats. I bring up Catholic theology in a discussion like this simply because I feel that it is a continuation of the New Testament narrative right into our modern age. So I do want to preface this video by saying this. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the nation of Israel and the Jewish people. And I would imagine anyone that has studied scripture or studied Torah for that matter would have found that they have a profound respect for the people of Israel, for their national story, for their theological story. Um, and I think the Jewish people are just a fascinating and wonderful people. If you look at history, they have an incredible history, and they've paid a high cost to be the covenant people. No matter how you spin it, no matter how you say it, they really have. And I don't like to see our nation plunging towards anti-Semitism. I think it's a short-sighted way of viewing the current situation, and that's part of the reason why I made this video. And if anything that I say in this video comes off as anti-Semitic, that is not the intent, and I will try to be as neutrally accurate as I can be. Um, so to kind of begin, I want to go back through the Old Testament narrative, frame that a little bit in a Genesis 6 perspective, and kind of keep moving forward, arriving at where we are today and what it could mean if you look at it through the Genesis 6 worldview. And so, as I'm sure probably anyone watching this or anyone with a Christian background probably have a pretty good idea of the story of Israel. And there is an important kind of side note um, to specifically the story of Israel, but how Israel relates to its relationship with the Palestinians, which of course are the occupants of Gaza. In the narrative of the Old Testament, of course, after God disinherits the 70 nations and turns them over to the sons of God, who in my last video I explained that in the Genesis 6 narrative, those are bona fide fallen divine beings. But divine beings that were given originally real authority over the earth. When God disinherited the nations, he turned them over to these divine beings. So after that, God's next move in the narrative is to call Abraham. And of course, he tells Abraham to pack up your wife, head out, go to this land that I am going to gift you, and your seed, your descendants will become a great nation, as numerous as the stars, and so on and so forth. But if you remember in the narrative, Abraham and Sarah, as well, her name is Sarah originally, but God changes it to Sarah. Sarah is barren, of course, in the story, but in the narrative, it's getting to the point where Sarah is also biologically clearly too old to have children. And, she goes to Abraham and says, "Well, God did say that it was your seed that would become this great nation. Perhaps it's another mother." And Abraham protests it initially. Oh, no, that's just not possible. But Sarah's able to convince him to have a child with Hagar, who is a handmaid Earlier in the story, Sarah and they end up in Egypt, and the Pharaoh tries to take Sarah as a wife, and God rescues her. And when they leave Egypt, Hagar, Sarah's handmaid, while she was with the Pharaoh, comes with them. So she suggests that Abraham sleep with her handmaid, which he does, and it produces a son named Ishmael. And he would be the eldest son of Abraham, but they raise Ishmael as if he is Sarah and Abraham's eldest biological son. So Abraham in the narrative finds out that Isaac will be born. Isaac is born. Isaac inherits the promise from God. And Abraham has to announce this to everybody, including Ishmael and Hagar. Uh, and Ishmael is, of course, very upset about it. He sees himself as the eldest son. Why would my younger brother inherit the promise over me? I'm the oldest son in ancient, even in modern times. It's not uncommon that the eldest son is given an exalted status above his siblings. It's been that way for a very long time. So eventually the tension between Hagar and Ishmael and Isaac and Sarah gets to the point that Sarah demands to Abraham that he cast them out. They got to go. And he does. And they're in the desert and they're nearing death. They're nearing dying of thirst and starvation. It's brutal. And you do wonder. I know Abraham sent them with provisions, but you would think he would have known this could be threatening. But anyhow, as they're near death, an angel sent from God and tells Hagar not to worry, that Ishmael too will be a great nation, and God is going to see them through this, which he does. So in biblical thought, and of course in modern age, nobody really refers back to this, but it is the biblical way of viewing it. Ishmael is the progenitor of the Arabian people or the Persian people, Palestinian people, Islamic people, whatever label you want to apply in modern age. He is the progenitor of them. And Isaac is the progenitor, of course, of the Jewish people. And I put this at the beginning of the video just to click that into your memory because that is going to be worthy of discussion later on. Both the Arabian people, Persian people, Islamic people, Muslim people, whatever you want to call them, and the Jewish people are sons of Abraham. And like I say, we'll bring that up a little bit later. But this is the national origin story of Israel. They view this story from Genesis and the book of Joshua and all the rest as their national story, the story of Israel's existence. And people would be surprised to learn a lot of this has pretty strong archaeological evidence behind it. For example, archaeologists have found uh, hieroglyphics that speak of an Egyptian royal who was a commoner that rose up to exalted status in Egypt. His name was Sennamat. He was known as a great military leader and great architect. And what's interesting is he just disappears from Egyptian history. But somebody took the time to go back and desecrate his tomb, desecrate his hieroglyphics. And it's clear that the Egyptian people, this guy went from exalted status to believed to be a traitor or did something that greatly offended the Egyptians because that was not terribly uncommon. If you had an exalted figure that fell from grace, someone would go and try to chisel away at their tomb or at the recording of their hieroglyphics in their life. And Sentiment is not buried in his tomb. So there are archaeologists that point to this possibly being the origin of Moses. And I'm not going to go real deep into that, but if anyone wants to read up on it, it's readily available. In addition to that, archaeologists have shown that there are some interesting coral formations in the Red Sea at the specific area where a land bridge just under the water's surface exists. The formations tend to look like wagon wheels or wagon wheels with axles, chariot wheels. Other unique discoveries have been made in those areas. So people that say that there's no historical relevance to the biblical story of Israel, they need to do some homework. There have been some pretty impressive findings. There have been findings that prove that King David existed, the house of David existed. There have been findings that show that many of these biblical stories, whether or not they were true word to word, we can debate that and probably will debate that now and forever. But definitely we can show that they have a root in historical truth. So, this is Israel's origin story, and what's fascinating about it, and why I say at the beginning that I have a tremendous amount of respect for Israel. Israel was probably the only nation on earth that at one time was a bona fide theocracy. And a theocracy, of course, is a nation that is governed by God. And Israel was a bona fide theocracy there for a bit. And it's a fascinating thing. I mean, when Israel was tuned in right and working, I don't know that they ever got 100% there, but there were times where they were better off than other times. And when they pulled that off, you I'm sure many of you have read the scripture and you can read the scripture. It was pretty amazing. So, to think that Israel has been or has always been or is this wicked, terrible thing is absurd. Israel's a nation that struggled with their covenant vows. I don't think there's a Jewish person on earth that would, argue that point. But they are also a nation that has proven deeply resilient, uh, deeply innovative. Israel as a country is an amazing place. And, there's many Christians in the United States that see the reformation of Israel in 1948 as downright prophetic. And the Catholic Church doesn't really go too far into that. My personal view is there's something to it. I mean, for that nation to reemerge thousands of years later, for them in the 1800s to resurrect the Hebrew language, and that's something that I would remind any American Christian. Our understanding of Scripture has gotten so much deeper because of Israel's resurrection of Hebrew. We owe 'em some real debts of gratitude in many ways, and, turning on the Jewish people right now when they need to be reminded that we have their back, they are our brothers and sisters, and, we're not going to allow the culture or the public sentiment to decay to a point that they need to be afraid. And I think as Christians, we have a duty there, to make sure that our Jewish brothers and sisters know that we're not going to let anything happen to them. This is not going to become a place where they're openly persecuted. This is not going to become a place where violence is allowed to be done to the Jews without real problems. And, I hope that President Trump's stance, whether or not I agree with it, I hope that makes them feel some level of comfort that there is a president in the White House that's not or seemingly not going to allow that to happen. Um, but this is Israel's national origin, and they, as I said, became a bona fide theocracy. And you can't see it, but I have a replica Ark of the Covenant in here, and I also have a model of the Second Temple. And the Ark of the Covenant alone is something that just fascinates me at a high level, and I read and write about it a lot because you can go throughout human history, and the Ark of the Covenant has been a coveted and a highly sought object. The design of both the first and second temple, it gets into cosmic geography. It gets into this purified and sanctified space for God. It's just blows me away, and it's some of my favorite stuff to read. And like I say, that I don't know that the Jews in the Old Testament ever got it 100%, but there were times when they did it really amazing things. You can read the book of Joshua, you can read the book of Samuel, and just a really incredible story. But what a lot of Christians miss is the intersection between the story of Israel in the Genesis 6 worldview. So in Deuteronomy 32, but it occurs after the Tower of Babel. God disinherits the nations. And I hear a lot of people say, well, he disinherited the nations except Israel. Well, there was no except Israel. Israel didn't exist. He disinherited it, all the nations. And the Bible tells us the number is 70. After he disinherits the nations, he proceeds to call Abraham. So, right at this point, you have 70 nations, each one with a different Elohim, a different son of God, some sort of divine being with authority over them. Uh, what many scholars, biblical scholars, and even secular scholars believe is that the cultural gods we see in history, Norse mythology, Greek mythology, Japanese mythology, Sumerian mythology, Celtic mythology, the list goes on and on and on. That's them. Those are the Elohim that were given authority over the nations. So God goes to call Abraham and form an entirely new nation that will become Israel. From the Genesis 6 worldview, and this is a difficult thing for folks to process, Israel is the only nation directly under God's authority. And when I tell my fellow Christians this, often what they say is,